Oh, hello, people. I I meant to play the music, and then I realised I hadn't started playing it. And then I thought I saw five people, but there were only two. But it doesn't matter. I can um, talk for a bit. I do have so much to say to you. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm 3 minutes late. I didn't even know I'd scheduled the time because I was fiddling around with other things, and I guess I might have inadvertently scheduled it for a time when I just meant to go live anyway. Because when I go live, without scheduling, I usually just play the music. I play the music first. But anyway, I do have lots to say. And you may all know that Jen was on JF yesterday talking about. Oh, I can't even remember now. But it was something to do with science and whether the universe was created or uncreated. She didn't mention Jainism. She seemed to think that she could just, merely by asserting it, prove that the universe was uncreated. Of course, we will never know, and we will never be able to convincingly persuade somebody else who holds the opposite view. Now, why do people argue about these things? So what if the universe was created? So what if it was uncreated? We're already here. But the political reasons for so doing are this. If you believe that the universe was created, then you find yourself asking who the creator was, and of course the religious will say, well, of course it was God. And the atheists will go, well, we don't like the sound of that. So there are political reasons for, believing in a creator God, because if you say that there was a Big Bang and something caused it, then you find yourself having to argue about whether to obey the laws of God or not. And since it involves a change in one's political views and lifestyle, people don't really want to go there. Now, Jen has certain views about physics and certain views about morality, and she does promote a theocracy. And because I do also promote a theocracy, I feel I have to follow her around and engage with her all these matters and spot the flaws in her arguments. And boy, are there many, and this is what I intend to deal with. So the view that the universe was always there when it was uncreated goes back to the ancient Greeks, and Jainism is also bases its position on. Well, it is a rather confused position from what I've read from the Wikipedia entry, and it is that the universe was always there. God is impersonal, but they are spirits, and we should follow the principle of non-violence and not hurting things. And but anyway, nobody wants to be a Jainist because it doesn't lead anywhere. Jains live in a fallen civilization. They are a minority in India. People can't see the point of it. Apart from saying, oh, look at these, ultra good people who don't want to hurt anyone, and you think, well, but they're poor. They live in a fallen civilization. Nobody takes them seriously. Nobody wants to be like them. Nobody envies them. And we come back to this question of, well, who should we follow? Should we follow the people we envy? But then if we envy them, then we hate them. And if we hate them, then we don't want to follow their rules. So this causes a lot of confusion and neurotic suspension, and I'm here to clear things up for you. And really the confused definitions, the confused reasoning of Church of Entropy is actually quite helpful. So I urge you to go to Voice of Reason and have a look at the timestamps that I've done on her post-JF a post-JF stream. Duvid was superb, really. He made all the points that you think should be made. If you're not quite clear about what they are, I'm very happy to explain them to you. So David has been saying in Week in Review and again in the post-JF stream about morality. And it's important because obviously this is what we're arguing about. When we argue about politics, we are arguing about morality. And this is why I am so insistent that the distinction between religion and politics is a distinction without a difference. I mean, it's exactly the same because people get as angry with each other whether they're talking religion or politics. So, and of course, politics is about changing particular laws, but of course, religion is about changing the entire moral system that you live under and proposing another. And obviously, if religion is more triggering than merely talking about politics. I mean, politics could be, just about parking or planning or, interest rates or taxes. But, if you want to change your moral system, you are talking about changing your political ideology and your religion. So it is massively triggering to already triggered people if, people are seriously talking about revolution and a rejection of the sacred cows that people have been worshipping for generations. The sacred cows of the West are, of course, democracy, feminism, and conservatism and liberalism. And, these ideas are, let's say, Christianity. Yeah, that's also another sacred cow. And it's all really, messed up in their, angry, confused little minds. It's, the more alienated you feel by the modern world, the more you want to rush back to your traditions. But if you don't understand them, if you don't analyse them, you are really maybe rushing back to something that has failed. But, nobody has kind of put an official notice saying, failed, do not try again. Or failed because, A, B, and C. They've just sort of left it in a mess, unlabelled, unsignposted, to trap the unwary traveller. Imagine if there was an open manhole cover on the pavement and nobody bothered to signpost it and warn people away. So you're going to fall into it. And I suppose you'll only notice that there's something wrong until, when the bodies that fall into the manhole pile up that, they smell or something. And so you're not going to fall in there because you notice something horrible, some horrible smell coming from that open manhole cover. Why do people, make these warn others, and it's because, basically Westerners are morally rotten. They think if they got away with something, it's because of how clever they are. They don't really want to warn other people. Maybe they enjoy it when other people fall into the trap, and so they can gloat about how clever they are not to fall into it until, somebody near and dear falls into it, so, like their children. But basically, they're all fucked in the head. You can't reason with them because talking to them is like talking to somebody high on drugs or already in an insane institution. What's wrong with the volume? You can't hear me? It's a bit annoying. Okay, I'll turn it up a bit. So yeah, you have people like, it's already halfway there, so, listen more closely. So basically, I'm not mixing with the great and the good, just mentally ill people and political vandals like Connops, who is basically a nihilist, which is also what Jen is. So they're here for the shits and giggles, and they know that when they're dead, but they'll have fun getting the gratifying attention that they hope to get from people who don't know any better. And, basically just by bullshitting. So, do they know what they're doing, or maybe they're okay? We can give them the benefit of the doubt. No, they know not what they do. It seems that Jay is trying to call me, or tried to call me and gave up. My volume is off. Can you really not hear me? Well, I haven't muted myself accidentally. So that's very strange. Can you hear me? Well, Connell seems to be able to hear me. Yeah, he's saying I'm not a nihilist, and but you don't believe in any system of morality. I have increased it. It's kind of halfway up, and that's quite loud. I don't know. Okay, I'll check a few things, but nope. Right. Okay, so let's go back to Jen's confused thoughts on morality. So she insists that her definition is correct, which is the one about minimizing suffering, and she won't accept that morality is more than minimizing suffering. Morality is not an aspirin or an analgesic. It's there to keep the group in existence and apart from others. What is the purpose of keeping the group in existence? Because if you are a group of people who follow certain rules and you are better than others as a consequence of following those rules, this needs to be explained, right? So people can at least wonder why you lot are doing better than other people. Unfortunately, if you do too well, people will hate you in the same way that they hate Jews, because they're saying Jews, because they do better than us, have cheated, and therefore we hate them and we have to stop them cheating us. And but anyway, the point is that we need to identify certain things and certain groups and have names so that we can identify them in order to more clearly think through problems. So the most interesting thing about the JF talk is that it led to the post JF show. What he did was, towards the end of her part on his show, was to say that Jen is insane. But anyway, he's rude, he's a nihilist, and the important thing to note about JF is that he's a nihilist. And I think to call oneself a nihilist is in fact to advertise that one cannot be trusted. So I know there was I did hear the debate between JF and Stefan Molyneux, and I know why Stefan Molyneux is not favoured by Jen, because Stefan would never have Jen on his show. He had me on his show, but he won't have me on his show now, probably because he knows that I'm promoting secular Quranism. But I'll have to be fair to Stefan Molyneux and at least say that what he promotes, his universally preferable behaviour, is an inferior version of the no-hide laws. Unfortunately, Molyneux didn't list what those universally preferable behaviours were, but I'm sure that they will be including some of the no-hide laws. I imagine that Stefan will include 5 of the no-hide laws out of the 7, and the 5 that I will list to you are this: the prohibition against sexual immorality, the prohibition against homicide, the prohibition against theft, the prohibition against eating parts of an animal while it's still alive, and finally the commandment to establish a legal system through which justice can be dispensed, and obviously justice according to the 4 laws that I have mentioned. So the 2 no-hide laws that I anticipate Stefan Molyneux having a problem with would be the ones forbidding blasphemy and idolatry. For Jews, the penalty for blasphemy and idolatry is death. Muslims are more the Quran is more tolerant about that. It does express disapproval about those who practice idolatry, but it doesn't say anything about blasphemy. So under secular Quranism, you would be allowed to practice idolatry, although you would be criticised by the mainstream for doing so, and blasphemy would, I suggest, be prosecutable only if it incites violence and causes public order problems. So and so that's why I call Stefan's universally preferable behaviour as an inferior version of the no-hide laws. Duvid would call them proto-no-hide. Let's look up the name. Definitely, I did look it up, what proto actually means. Original or primitive, first or earliest. So it's kind of sub-no-hide, not as good as no-hide. Anyway, back to JF and Stefan, and it is that it can be so easily established which one of them would go further. So, you white nationalists, you only have JF and Stefan to choose from. Who would you choose? You'd choose Stefan, wouldn't you? Because at least Stefan talks about absolute morality, and he's saying, well, nobody should be allowed to murder each other or steal from each other or commit sexual immorality. So he would agree with that. I'm sure you'd agree about, not eating animals while they're still alive, and of course the government's duty to establish a court and legal system to administer and enforce the law. So obviously, it's a tick list. You're saying, well, the more boxes you tick out of the 7 boxes of the no-hide laws, the more, I guess you could say, kosher you are, and the more morally respectable you become. And this is what we want. We want to be morally respectable so people listen to us. So, if you believe in the whole Abrahamic narrative, out of all the things that we can think of course the Abrahamic God is the most moral being of all. And how do we know? Because we already know that Jews are the world's most ancient and powerful tribe, whose religion, Christianity and Islam, are derived. And one of the things David was saying that, well, Christianity and Islam is the effort of the Gentile to copycat us. To which Jen had no response, but you can't deny the truth, really. Just because Judaism is prior to Christianity and Islam, it's just a fact. Now, which is better? This is also a rational choice, really. You want to worship the most powerful being conceivable as a Gentile, then you really only have Christianity and Islam to choose from. So at the moment, Christianity still, I think, technically, officially has more Christians. I mean, there are more Christians than there are Muslims, but we kind of know that Christians don't really believe that an executed revolutionary is a co-equal of God. They, why did people become Christian? Because they were, half persuaded and half compelled. So we have to understand that in the West, they were basically compelled. What happened was that the Christian missionaries in Rome would go to individual European monarchs and say, hey, we've got this Christianity thing. We're sure you're going to love this. It'll be much more advanced than your paganism, because, well, you were pagans when the Romans invaded you, weren't you? And the Romans were pagan too, and now they are no more. And you know that Constantine converted to Christianity, and and now we are the new Romans, and we know stuff that you don't, because you're only primitive. But if you adopt Christianity, European monarch, you'll do better than you currently are, because we're really organised. We can show you ways of organising your government and your politics to make you richer and more prestigious, and of course that we're from Rome, and we're the eternal city and all that. And most European monarchs were persuaded. Do you think they asked their people nicely to convert to Christianity? Of course not. They basically forced them to do it. And yeah, it does work, because once you force one or two generations to become an adherent to your religion, then future generations will do it, because people will just always try to fit in with mum and dad. And if everyone around them is whatever religion they are, they'll just stick to it, because most people are conformists. They don't want to upset mum and dad and upset aunt and uncle and grandma and grandpa. They'll just stick to whatever they started out with. And we already know that in Europe, it was not a good idea to be a different Christian denomination from the established one. So if you were Catholic, once you were the mainstream until the Reformation, and then there was a time for about 150 years when there were all these wars about, between Catholics and Protestants, and there's still a lot of bad blood between them. And then, even after individual European nations had their own established church, they would still prosecute the non-denominational Christians, i.e. Christians who weren't of the established church. So this went on and on and on, and spilled over into the New World, where Quakers and Puritans fought each other. And then the Americans got the First Amendment, and then they separated the church from their state. They quarantined the church, in fact. But really, if you ask most Westerners, they wouldn't know what the hell I was talking about. That wasn't the narrative of history they learned. And you can see why they don't teach this sort of thing at school, because it would be too injurious to Christianity, wouldn't it? And for political reasons, nobody wanted to injure Christianity, because what would be the alternative? The alternative would be Islam or Judaism, and Judaism is too hard for the degenerate Gentile who's been marinating in his sex and shopping culture that his parents had been enjoying since they started enjoying sex and drugs and rock and roll. So as you can see, the West is in trouble. Yeah, it's interesting. Why do you want Spaceman to come on? He doesn't really have anything to say except libertarian. You can't prove that libertarianism is better. There's just no time waste. I just don't want to waste any time. It's like, oh, okay, you've been talking for all this time. Let somebody else speak. But they have nothing constructive to say. So the reason why they didn't want to talk down Christianity was because they kind of saw that it was somehow linked to marriage and family values, and they vaguely had an idea that marriage and family values was what made the West great and allowed the settlers of the New World to easily defeat the Native American who didn't practice marriage and family values. They were in fact matriarchal, which means that just look at it this way, that once upon a time Neanderthal man didn't practice marriage, and then he was replaced by Homo sapiens, who discovered the practice of marriage, and after that he was just more organized than Neanderthal man, and he basically killed Neanderthal man and took his women enslaved his children, mated with his women, and basically replaced them. And this is what's going to happen to anyone who strays from patriarchy. It is only a matter of time. So that's why marriage and family values is important. I know Jen doesn't like it because she calls it shitting out infinity kids. She thinks patriarchy is shitting out infinity kids. We can see her viewpoint, simply because she probably won't be in a position to have children. So, it's sour grapes. And okay, you're going to say, oh, but the overpopulation and whatever. But these things actually correct themselves. So you have an overpopulation, and it's for, and then really when you do have a youth bulge, you expand your empire because young people who have been basically kicked out. It's not just foreigners who are kicked out from their country. People of your own race and tribe do kick you out. They're saying, well, you're getting too big now. You have to go out in the world and earn your living. You can't live with mum and dad forever. So that's what happened to the Vikings. I mean, basically lots of Vikings were kicked out. So they had to rape and pillage other countries. So all empires were basically kicked out people who had to make their fortune. Jews were once landless slaves in Egypt. They weren't kicked out, they wanted to be released, they were landless. So they went to Canaan, and then they conquered the Canaanites and took over their land and established the state of Israel. So that's how it's done. This is the brutal truth of how you acquire empire. Of course, women don't like that. They think, oh, well, we're better than that. But then they don't have to do these things. They don't have to support their spouse and children. They can stay at home and, inculcate their, happy, clappy values of how wonderful everything is in childhood. But men kind of know that you have to fight people. You have to compete against others in our cold, cruel world. And of course we should be nice. But we're treading a thin line. And of course, to be properly balanced as people, we should have the benefit of mum and dad interacting with us. Unfortunately, bad parenting is now the rule in the West, and that's why I have such difficulty getting through to people who, on the one hand, claim to submit to truth, logic and morality, and while on the other hand, dissing it like Jen. Perhaps they don't know what they're doing. So back to Jen's confused ideas about morality. So if you go back to her stream, you will find that she's talking over Duvid, stopping him from making his point, accusing him of, being Jewish and imposing his laws on others. And she's obviously not in a state of mind prepared to accept correction or be able to deal with any of the points that Duvid raises substantively. She's basically unable to accept truth, logic and morality if it conflicts with her chosen worldview. And this is the sadness of it all, really. She's basically saying, I prefer my crap to the truth, to reason, to morality. I'm just so cool. I prefer my own crap because it's my own crap. That's basically what a lot of people think. I mean, to be fair to Jen, she's not the only person who thinks that. And you think, why are there so many people like that? You know, that's like, why? And I think it's basically bad parenting. You know, I bet people who actually say, I prefer my own shit to your truth, to any reason, however superior, to any morality, you know, just because I prefer my own shit because it's mine. They're obviously narcissists. And fucked in the head, shit for brains narcissists who nobody has ever corrected. So, you know, they will make free with the meaning of words. It's like, I choose to use this word in this stupid shit way and you can't do anything. Because I've never been corrected, because I went to a shit school too, because my parents didn't care that I went to a shit school, and when I was acting up, they basically bribed me or waited for the storm of my shit behaviour to pass and then thought that, you know, that was problem solved. So generations of Westerners have been brought up by this kind of shit parenting, and so that's why they will, on the one hand, pretend that they believe in truth, logic, and morality, and when you confront them with it, they'll say, oh, but you're mad. So, for Jen, we've known each other for over a year now. She can't defeat my arguments, but she knows that nothing will happen to her if she keeps talking her shit, because, well, a lot of people like her shit because she's a passably attractive woman. Why do you think JF invited her? Because he believed in her? Because he thought it was going to be somehow a constructive debate and a way of learning new truths and acquiring new knowledge? Of course not. Church of Entropy represents a woman of a certain class, of a certain age, of a certain education, and it is the most powerful demographic of the West. You know, the white, middle class, college educated woman who is passably attractive. I don't think he was doing it to advance human knowledge. He was there to fill airtime. If you look at the comments in the chat, they were basically rubbish comments. So really the better debate would be what David said about morality and religion and the atheist contempt for chastity. Why do atheists have such contempt for chastity? Because of course they're sexually liberated. They think because there is one life only, and it is the life that they are currently leading, and that when they die, they're not going to give up any pleasure that they're going to have the opportunity of having in this life, will they? Connaught isn't. Not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. They're going to say, if any slut presents herself to me, I'm going to fuck her. It would be rude not to. And anyway, when we're dead, we're dead. So this represents a short-term thinking, and this makes them basically politically inert. So while some of them, briefly, darkly, dimly see that my ideas make sense in the long term, they won't support me because they don't see how it is going to succeed in the short term. Of course, if I was about to become, dictator or something, they'd be supporting me and pledging loyalty, but because nobody listens, and nobody listens because atheists are nihilists, and they think, well, we can still get away with running everything down and just saving the best bits for ourselves. We're not taking any risk in defending any principle because we might get into trouble. People might frown at us and deprive us of our jobs. We're not defending any truth or any principle or any logic because in the short term, it's going to result in being punished and being deprived of status, income, and employment. So we're not going to do that. And this is how everyone thinks. And that, of course, explains the reason for my failure to persuade anyone. I mean, if I'm relying on truth, logic, and morality to persuade people, and everyone makes a point of rejecting truth, logic, and morality, then, well, what would be the point? But that's not going to make me change my tune. I mean, the people who say, well, you should say something else. Maybe tell us a few stories and tell us a few pretty lies that we might like to hear. How about blaming Jews? How about expressing hatred for Muslims or other races or China? And then we might listen to you. Then your subscribers might go up. And that is more or less the kind of helpful advice that I've been getting. So when you think of the mainstream alt-right, utterly incapable of dealing with their problems or, of even dealing in the short term with their bad publicity, you will see how hopeless it is. Now, Jen has kind of said she wants to debate me, but it has to be a formal debate. And I'm declining on the basis of it'll be really boring and nobody will care what was being said, and they will just be in a live chat and talk shit to each other and not listen to it at all. And there will be, and nobody else will want to listen to it because it's just rubbish and nonsense and nobody wants to listen to it anyway. So I'm declining to participate under these conditions, and that will be a source of relief for her because she knows she can't deal with me on a one-to-one basis without getting triggered, swearing, being rude and making everyone think she's mad. She wants a formal debate so she can rig the outcome and say, on a technicality, I lost, even though she failed completely to make a sound argument. Now, which of you in the chat actually remember what we were arguing about in June last year? Do you even care? I mean, those of you who remember, it was something about a personal God. Since most of you are atheists anyway, why would you care? You think the question in itself is stupid. Why talk about the characteristics of something that you believe to be non-existent? So nobody listened, so everybody talked shit in the chat. And all they could go by was who sounded smoother, who had the PowerPoint presentation, even if they could remember nothing of what Jen said. But then Jen is more into grandstanding than the advancement of human knowledge. But then she's a narcissist, while I have a political message. So I can sum up what we were arguing about very briefly, because I just wouldn't recommend that you go back and listen to it anyway. So basically, Jen is saying, my God is better than the Abrahamic God. It wasn't framed in that way, of course. It was, is God personal or impersonal? But Jen's God being impersonal is the one that she's promoting, and she's saying the impersonal God doesn't care about you. And this is really, the slippery slope into atheism. So, and then she goes on to admit that she's a nihilist, like JF. And I'm quite confident anyway that if God forbid you were forced to choose as theocratic leader between Jen and me, I know you'd choose me, because you know what my rules are. Or if you're not quite sure, you can always look it up. But for Jen, it's not written down anywhere, and she'll change her mind to suit herself. And of course, it would be the same between JF and Stefan Molyneux. Stefan Molyneux at least has declared his principles, and we know that his universally preferable behaviour will include some of the no-hide laws. And you'll probably think that's fair enough. And that is really the litmus test between who is more effective and who is more trusted. And so, how are we going to solve the political problems of government right now, right here? Obviously, we have to propose a solution, but since everyone is too cowardly to propose one because they're, short-termists, then nothing can be done. And of course, your emotions of hatred for Jews and Muslims will always be stronger than any trace of reasoning capacity for accepting truth, logic, and morality. I mean, you just haven't led lives that encouraged you to cleave to truth, logic, and morality. In fact, everything about your upbringing and your lives have been pushing you towards hedonism and short-term pleasures until you can't imagine any other way of existing other than the way you have always lived. Which, of course, you translate as our way of life, our culture, way of life, extramarital sex, culture, sex and shopping, and drugs and alcohol. So that is basically what you think secular Quranism threatens you with. So you'll be wanting the status quo of your rock and roll and sex and drugs and your sex and shopping and your slut fucking. You're not really interested in solutions, and your politicians will not be wanting to risk your wrath by offering such things to you. So that's why I'm not getting anywhere. And of course, they don't care about you, because really, parents who care about their children would take the trouble to give them a good education and would take the trouble to reason with them and say, look, you can't behave like that. You have to accept what the rules are, because if you keep breaking the rules, you'll end up in prison. If you rely on faulty logic, you'll end up making mistakes. And if you prefer lies to truth, then all your reasoning, however sound, will end up wrong anyway. Did any of your parents tell you that? Probably not, huh? I don't think Jen's parents did. And that's why she's the way she is. Well, it's a shame, really. I mean, I've offered her a deal, and it's like, well, how about I measure the state of your mental health by how able you are to be civil to me. I don't expect you to defer to me, but you can be civil to me. How about trying that? And of course she can't do it, because her overweening pride, her compulsive desire to assert status and superiority prevents her from doing that. But just imagine for a moment that Jen submitted, not to me necessarily, but to truth, logic and morality, which only requires her to be civil and discuss the topics that I want to discuss, to develop the narrative. I wouldn't be requiring her to agree with me, just capable of having a civil, honest and rational debate about what the principles, what moral principles ought to be. But she can't even do that. And she thinks it's a sign of success to be invited time and time again by JF, who of course has a bigger channel, but whom nobody trusts. Would you trust your daughter with JF? Particularly if she is, as the English would say, a sandwich short of a picnic? Of course not. Now, if you don't think you can trust somebody like that with your daughter, why would you trust somebody like that with the running of your government? So fundamentally, it's all about trust and confidence, and nobody has any trust or confidence in anyone other than the so-called reality of their emotions and their current mood, which will soon pass. So tactically, people with bigger channels think they can ignore me indefinitely because, well, what can I do? I'm only one woman. But if Jen were to get on board, or, as I said, she doesn't have to agree with me, she's free to disagree with me, and gauge her mental health by how able she is to observe the civilities of a rational discourse, that would signal an improvement in her mental and moral health. But I think she will believe that her delusions are better than my truth and logic. I can already anticipate how she will think and behave and say. And this is the sadness of it all. Really, I concentrate on Jen because actually, even if Jay were to come on board now, people will go, oh no, who cares? But if Jen did, it would make more of an impact simply because of a feminine privilege. Because look at it this way, guys. You have to accept what your women are. So if most women were sluts, you'd have to accept it. And if women decided not to be sluts, to not put out, you'd have to accept it too. So if most women said, we're not going to be sluts anymore, we don't want to work after we're married, we want to stay home and look after children, our legitimate children of the marriage, and you, men, you have to support us on one income alone. You have to buy a home for us, and you have to pay for the kids. You do it. You would have no choice but to do it. And that is basically the essence of feminine privilege. So, Jen could still assert a feminine privilege, but in a good way this time. Will she do it? Who knows? I'll read the chat now. I haven't heard a single comment. I haven't read a single comment that is dealing with my points. Okay, so I'm not letting anyone on until I hear something, until I read something worth responding to from somebody who wants to come on. Spacepan says, I thought Jen and I had an interesting conversation about aesthetics. The aesthetics of what, girl? Alex would ask, if Jen is a nihilist, does that mean she doesn't care about the destruction of the countryside and the decline of science? A nihilist, I would say, is somebody who doesn't accept that there is a purpose to existence. So, look at it this way. If you believed in the Abrahamic God, and you believe the whole narrative of it, which is that he created us for a purpose, and he created us to follow his laws, then life already has a purpose, right? And then, if we're in trouble, we can pray to him. If we get what we want, we can thank him. And this attitude of life enriches us spiritually, and also creates in us inner resources to defend principles, fight successful imperial wars, acquire great empires which become great civilizations, and that sort of thing. And if you lose this ability to think in terms, in abstract terms, because obviously people who believe in God or aren't nihilists will be thinking about posterity, about people that will never meet. So if you had a sense of honor, you would not want to be thought of by future generations as people who just let this globo-homo shit wash over them and not fight back. You'd feel, horror and shame and humiliation at the thought of, just living in this moral sewage and just happily ingesting it. And saying, oh well, if we say anything, we might lose access to slut fucking. So we're not going to do it. So, people like that might feel shame and they might be prompted to defend a principle or two. So nihilism is saying there's no such thing as absolute morality that we ought to follow. But maybe JF is confusing what is and what should be, because they're two different questions, right? If we think you cannot derive, we cannot derive a should from an is, because, what we see doesn't mean it isn't what should happen. So you see something terrible, somebody beating up someone in the street. So you saw it. What are you to conclude about that? Well, I suppose a decent person would say, well, we shouldn't see violence on the streets. Somebody ought to stop that, even if it's not me. Surely I can call the cops. Or if the cops are called, they should stop it and not sit around and laugh. Whatever. They will have some idea of propriety, of moral propriety about these things, about what should happen. But if you're a nihilist, you would be like JF saying, ooh, it's just a preference. And then you get people like Jen saying, oh, but he's so wonderful, he wants me to be on this show, so people can laugh at me and he can call me insane. So he'll get more subscribers and people, every now and then, the viewers of JF want to have a look at a white, middle-class, college-educated woman. That's a thing, isn't it? These alt-right streams are entirely male-dominated, and Jen would be considered a breath of fresh air by all these thirsty men. That was why she was invited. If JF wanted a proper debate, it would be me he'd invite, but he's not, because he's a dishonourable shit. I don't understand your question, Spaceman. Why are you and Duvid insisting that anyone who is anti-murder is proto-nohide? Okay, proto means original or primitive, first or earliest. So he means that if you're proto-nohide, like Stefan Molyneux, and thank you, Spacepan, for directing me to that essay of Molyneux, talking about your university preferential behaviour, university preferred behaviour, I think it was. He's saying that Stefan's list is inferior to the Noahide laws. So that's what proto means. So Spacepan wants to ban circumcision. It's a byproduct of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, I think. Because other people, parents circumcising their male offspring is no skin off his nose. But he chooses to obsess about it. Alex Woodrow says, parents that care about their children nowadays would move to a little tiny populated world with them with just basic resources and homeschooling. Jay's funny. Measure Jen's effectiveness by how many days Gandalf is in the lockdown ward. Okay, I've come to the end of the stream. I mean, has anybody got any arguments that they would like to put to me, either in the comments or in the hangout? No? Then I'll end the stream because I actually want to do other things, or I should be doing other things. And oh yeah, finally, it is really this lack of morality that makes it impossible to organise any effective political challenge to the status quo. So obviously, if patriarchy were happily established and secure, you wouldn't need me to talk about this, to point out the obvious. You wouldn't need that. You wouldn't need me to do any of this. So, so the fact that it's not working means I'm here, I'm saying what you should do, and you're not capable of doing it because you just haven't got the ability to organise yourselves, and you don't want to give it up. You think, well, what's left of Western civilization I can still enjoy until I'm dead, and then I don't care what happens after I'm dead. Even if I have children, I don't really care what they think. They'll just think I let all this happen, let all this wash over me. I never protested. Yeah, I mean, lots of parents with legitimate children actually don't care about their children. They're saying, yeah, I'll leave them this mess. I'll leave them this shit. Nothing to do with me. Who cares about them? I can just, agree with whatever stupid shit my children say, because I don't want to antagonize them, because if I say anything that they don't like, they'll probably not visit me in my care home, or not visit me if I'm for ages, because they're so offended about what I said about their career choice or shit boyfriend or shit girlfriend. So I'm not going to say anything. I'll just pretend to be their friend. So the whole point about morality is the ability to get all the different classes and the different ages and the different sexes to cooperate with each other to deal with their internal and external enemy, and you can't do that. I'm only going to let somebody on if they have anything to say. Thomas never has anything to say. Yeah, he can, talk loud, but he hasn't got anything to say, has he? Nothing constructive or hate. But yeah, it's all to do with religion, and you can't accept that Christianity is kaput, and your problems are not going to get any better if you refuse to talk about it. And it seems to be the case that nobody with a channel bigger than mine will talk about what religion is for. They are already so degenerate and shit for brains that they can't talk about the purpose of religion, or at least they don't trust themselves to talk about it with me, and they're not talking about it with each other. So, Aaron Amihud, what do you think Thomas is going to say? He's just going to, shout a lot. So I'll end the stream now.